Welcome back to the Sooner Surge. Hey, before we get started with this video, a couple things. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you turn your notifications on. Be a part of the Sooner Surge community. Also, you see the logo up there, the Fan Stop. Check them out, www.thefanstop.com. They just dropped the OU Texas hats. They're pretty sweet. Make sure you check them out. Also, subscribe to the Shirt of the Month Club. Use code SURGE. You'll get 10% off your first 3 months. And we are joined tonight by former Oklahoma tight end Trent Ratterree. Trent, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so let's just kind of get into it. I mean, 2 games into the season, we talk about it all the time as fans, but from a player perspective, kind of your overall thoughts from the first 2 games of the season.
Overall, I think, I'm going to start with the most obvious. The defense has been looking, I think, like fantastic. They're making plays, flying all over the field. Looks like at each position, they seem like they're incredibly deep. And so even if they have to make some substitutions, it doesn't seem to hurt them much at all. But, and then that kind of brings us to the offense. And I think the first game, I think the offense was looking okay. I think getting the jitters out of the first game, Temple, wasn't an extremely tough opponent. But I thought everything looked fairly clean. But this week with Houston, there were some obvious mistakes, missed assignments. But, and the way I feel about that is, it's really lucky that they get to practice for a full week before they play every game. And the mistakes I saw, missed blocking assignments, maybe a missed cut here or there, or not targeting in the pass game, maybe not targeting the route in the best way that you possibly could, probably. And so I think a lot of those things are, in my opinion, minor. And I think they'll be able to clean a lot of that up. So, I mean, like specifically, there was an interception. I think it was in the late third, early fourth quarter, post route. And it looked like Jackson kind of threw the ball because he was thinking that the way it looked like the receiver was maybe flattening off the post instead of taking it high. But then he changed his mind kind of as the ball was in the air. And so things like that, communication issue is really what I would call that. Because the defenders on the downfield side of the receiver, so he should be taking it high to the end zone for a touchdown. But the ball wasn't delivered there. It was delivered underneath, and it went right into the defender's arms. So I think some things like that with a young quarterback and the injuries that have plagued the wide receiver group, I think a lot of that's going to get cleaned up in film. And then once they get on the practice field, they'll maybe get the opportunity to develop better instincts for plays like that when they're in the game.
Yeah.
Hey, Trent, you brought up, the receivers. Of course, they've had the injury bugs bitten them pretty hard, especially at that position. You played tight end. Of course, you were in a prolific offense pretty much your entire career. Offensive struggles a lot really weren't going through Norman at your time there. But maybe talk about OU was pretty successful in the double tight end set the other night, even with Roberts and Bauer Sharp. I think they even went 3 tight ends with McIntyre once. But maybe just talk about, if struggles happen, what a 2 tight end set can bring to the table as opposed to some of the spread stuff.
Well, I think so. The tight end group that they have right now, I think they have a really strong group, and that hasn't been. We've had some strong tight ends throughout, the last handful of years, but I don't know that we've had a group like this for a while. And so I think, being able to use 2 tight ends on the field, it adds diversity to your offense. You're able to get into 2 tight sets and run the ball. You can maybe split one out in the slot, which is what we did a lot. And so you have 1 true tight end and 1 that's split out. And you get to make those changes and run a whole wide gamut of plays without having to make substitutions. And I think that's pretty huge in the college game because when you have to sub, it gives the defense the opportunity to kind of slow down, and then they get the opportunity to sub. And so being able to have a crew of guys, especially with, their main wide receivers kind of, being injured, I think that's a good route for them to go. And I expect them to probably go that way and get the tight ends a lot more involved. Because I think these first 2 games, tight ends have shown they're ready to play. And I think they have a lot of potential. And so maybe that's the answer. Maybe some extra, some more tight end targets. Of course, they always have to be mixed up in the run game. So, still trying to, keep them strong on that. And maybe, because if you have a really good blocking tight end on the edge, it opens up your run game where you don't have to run between the tackles all the time necessarily,
Yeah.
And so it just really, that's kind of the great thing tight ends bring to the game is it allows offenses to kind of diversify. And it's, it may be hard, when you have 2 tight ends on the field, it may be difficult for the defenses to guess what you're ultimately trying to do. Are you trying to run the ball, or are you in the passing game? Like, what kind of situation are you in? And so, and also with tight ends, they have a great ability of catching the ball over the middle and taking those shots and not getting busted up. And so there's a whole different kind of passing game that you can get into. And so I think I kind of expect them to, we'll see if Nick Anderson's back. Farouk is obviously he's out for a while, I think. And so I think we'll be able to see kind of where they go with that. And I think that would be a great idea,
Yeah. And you mentioned going across the middle. I mean, quite frankly, the guys they've had there at the receiver, they're not very big in size as far as going up the middle. So that would probably help. You mentioned earlier about communication on the Burks play, just communication in general. As a tight end, the pass protection, the communication as far as picking up blocks, they're throwing a whole gambit of offensive linemen out there right now. I think Jackson Arnold started 3 games and had obviously 3 different linemen, 3 different centers. I mean, just kind of maybe what kind of toll does that take on a young quarterback when you have a new center, you have guys moving from one side of the line to the other, you have trying to pick up communication on who's picking up the blitz, just kind of what does that take, kind of a toll does that take on Jackson?
Well, I would think from my perspective, there's not having that consistency, maybe, it probably affects some confidence, whether you like to admit it or not, it does, I think. But you may not feel it necessarily, but it's there. But I think the more that he can be comfortable and maybe even get a little bit more comfortable, I think the better he's going to do. And so consistency can add to comfortability. It can mitigate stress. I think, there's kind of a lot of ways to fight that stress, and in football, especially the level OU plays at, and with the pressure that they have, my best advice is really just trusting the process of your practice throughout the week. The work that you put in throughout the week from Monday to Friday, and the film you watch, all the work, not just the physical work, but the more you put in, it tends to work out that on Saturdays, the more you're going to get out. And so I would say, I think just really digging in, focusing hard, and trusting that process that you're going through, because they have great coaches. That's not even close to an argument. And you have great players around you, but you have a lot of the players around you, they have great potential. And so the whole chase, the journey, so to speak, is actualizing that potential. And so I think trusting the process and working hard and really getting into the nitty gritty and making sure and capitalizing on every single rep in practice, I think that's kind of the pathway. That's the pathway I was taught, and I think that's the pathway that works most of the time.
Yeah. Do you like the RPO game just in general?
Yeah, I think it's, it has its place. I think it can be good, but to set up an RPO, you have to have a strong run game.
Mm-hmm.
And so otherwise there's nothing to respect. And so I think that's kind of where the O-line comes into play, where I think a lot of the work I was just talking about, they need to improve significantly. And I don't say that to say that they're bad. I absolutely do not think they're bad. I think they have a lot of potential, but working on taking the right steps, not wasting any steps. So being efficient with your body and your technique, actually striking people, cutting them off from, the flow to the ball. A lot of those things, they seem tedious in the time when you're practicing, but when it comes to game time and you're tired or it's hot or your arm, or you're hurt a little bit, but you're not injured, that technique pays off because a lot of it is muscle memory. And so if you don't have it down to that level, then frankly, you're not prepared. And, preparation in football is everything. And so, I think that's something that it looks like, and I know Coach Bedenbaugh, he has shown time and time again that he trains his players, coaches his players to a very high level. And so I have no doubt that, if I can spot these mistakes and things like that, then I know for sure he has it. And I think, they just have to continue to work and really try to improve throughout the practice week. Really, they need to have a series of really great practices.
Yeah, and I heard Deion Burks actually say that today. Talked about paying attention to detail at the beginning of practice week. Trent, you played with several running backs there at OU. They've shown the double running back set 4 or 5 times this year. I know that how much, again, that's it. And I guess you got to figure out identity is part of the issue here with this offense. There's got to be an identity. I know Landry Jones is much more of a pro set type quarterback. They weren't running zone reads with Landry Jones, but they did adjust as Blake Bell became quarterback there. There were a lot of adjustments that were made. Do you think that when you got, because they've played really 3 guys with Sawchuk, Barnes, and Tatum sparingly, I hear people say all the time, Trent, well, you got to go with one because they got to get the rhythm. And then you hear other people say, nah, you can play multiple guys. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm more of the opinion that I think you have to play. You have to have multiple running backs. The days of having a one guy every down back, those days are over, unless you want your one guy to be injured the whole season. Because the hits that they take, the speed of the game. Like the physicality, like I said, I really think you've got to have at least 3 pretty good running backs that are ready to go, maybe more, honestly. Because ultimately, when they're running down the field, they need to be running at their top speed every single time. They need to be running with their full force every single time. And to take those hits and to do that and to do it for 60, 65 plays a game, week in, week out. I think that's got to be impossible, from my opinion again. Yeah. So I think it really adds strength and depth to the offense if you have more than one. And I think the fact that they have 3 that can be on the field during meaningful time, I think that's significant. That's something that will help them in the long run.
Hey, a couple of questions on, obviously you played while Brent Venables was there coaching defense, and then also playing with DeMarco Murray. Maybe your thoughts on DeMarco, did you think he'd be a coach? Like when you were playing, did you see that route going for him? And then also maybe as Brent Venables, just from the different side of the ball, being on offense, just maybe his intensity on defense.
So I'll start with on DeMarco. Honestly, it never crossed my mind that he would be a coach because he was such a great player.
Yeah.
And so but it makes sense now. He always knew the offense really well. He helped other guys learn the offense, lowerclassmen, freshmen and sophomores, guys that were new. So, I mean, he was always kind of coaching while he was playing, and a lot of us did that. A lot of people, when they become upperclassmen, do that. Because sometimes, it's just the interaction, the relationship between the player and the coach. Sometimes people just don't get it that way. They need to hear it from a teammate.
Yeah.
And so I think DeMarco, he always kind of showed a proclivity for coaching for sure. It just never crossed my mind back then because he was such a great player, and it just didn't, but with Coach Venables, I mean, he is very intense, and he's very sharp, and he's always prepared. I don't know if over preparation is really a thing, but if it were, he would be the person that's doing it. Probably nobody else. But he knows his stuff. He's intense about details. He's very detail oriented. And he wants people to work hard. And ultimately, he wants them to do all these things so that they themselves can experience success. He wants his players to be successful, and he'll help them any way he can. He'll go to great lengths to make sure that his players are successful, because I think he truly cares about his players. And I think he's shown that, with a lot of the off the field things they've done. Like, for instance, starting the Soul Mission, which is like an office entirely devoted to player development and hiring former players to fill those spots. I think that's a lot of people don't do that. A lot of universities don't do that. And so I think he shows a great devotion towards wanting each and every person to be successful, whether it's in football or it's after football. And he's always shown that. I mean, even whenever I was playing, even though I was on offense, and a lot of times if I was successful, he wasn't happy about it on the practice field. But, in games or in the locker room or, off the practice field, he would tell you, good job, great job. And I really felt like he was kind of rooting for all of us.
Yeah.
Trent, why don't you maybe give us the favorite game you ever played in as a Sooner? Think about that for a second. And then also, I know a lot of Sooner fans are going to see this video and say, man, what's Trent Ratterree up to these days? So maybe share on that.
Sorry, I just noticed I might be getting a little dark. I hope does that help? I hope
there you go.
Yeah, that's a little better. Yeah.
That's good.
Favorite game. Well, I'll start with what I'm doing now. I'm in my last year of law school, and so it's I've been working pretty hard at that the last few years. And I kind of have it narrowed down to a few areas of law that I want to work in, but I think ultimately I probably want to end up in sports law, and whatever that looks like, time will tell. So I don't know. I can't really speak on that yet. But as far as my favorite game, I mean, there's a few. I think, that Bedlam game in 2010, so my junior year, when we it was that where we scored like collectively 40 something points in the last like few minutes.
Yeah.
And that one was pretty fun. Also, another Bedlam game, which is probably the one I should have probably mentioned first. But in 2009, whenever I saved the shutout, I think, I really kind of enjoyed that one because, my recruiting with OSU didn't quite go as the way I wanted it to, you know, and so and there were a few other schools, so it wasn't just OSU. There were a few other schools on my list of you know, where I wanted to make some big plays like that. But it just, you know, when you end up, when you go through recruiting the way I did, which was almost not going through it, and feeling like you're not respected and as an athlete, and then you get a chance to kind of make a statement, that's always a special feeling. And then I don't know, the other one would probably be when we beat Nebraska in what was supposed to be the last Big 12 championship. I had a few catches in that, but the catches weren't really the thing. I kind of made my own call in a way, but we were running this play where I was supposed to check for a blitz, and if there was no blitz, I needed to get out into the flat. But I saw someone kind of breaking free, and it wasn't a blitz. It was just Crick, I think is his name. He was a defensive tackle for Nebraska. And I just kind of pulled in and got in his way, and Landry was able to make a throw to Cam, and we got a first down. It was like a 3rd and 20 something. And so that was pretty fun. And then obviously we got the ring from that, you know, the Big 12 championship. But I would say I don't know that I can narrow it to one, but those would probably be my top 3 for sure.
That's awesome. Hey, one last question.
Mm-hmm.
One Schmitty story. You got one?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many, and I feel like a lot of us tell stories about how hard the workouts were, and a lot of times I feel like the difficulty of those workouts don't really get conveyed in the story, but I think I have one that's pretty good. It's a little gross, but I'll try to spare the details. But it was like I think it was the summer before my sophomore year. So I was still relatively, you know, new. And we had done this, it was a crazy workout. I mean, it was like whatever time in the weight room, which was a long time. And then we did some other stuff on the field, and then we had to jog across to the stadium to run stadiums. And before they renovated it, it looked a lot different. You know, it was one you had the stairs all the way to the top, and you had to get from the bottom to the top in about 11 seconds, I think is what it was.
Dang.
And but I had made it. I did all the reps. I made it. Didn't fall. Didn't get kicked out. Nothing. And we're ending the workout, you know, and he's like, everyone get your hands in here, you know, and put my hand in there. And he's like, all right, you know, Sooners on 3, you know, and then he counts down 1, 2, 3. And right at that moment when I'm about to yell Sooners, I just throw up in the middle of the whole group.
Oh, wow.
And I thought he was going to be a little ticked at me, but he ended up laughing about it. And so I was like, well, I made it. And I was very proud of myself because it was a tough workout. And I was still at the point in my OU career where I was on the upward of the hill. I was still climbing the hill. I hadn't quite figured it out yet. Huh. And so,
awesome.
So
that's
I think,
great story, man.
Yeah. I think that story really conveys how difficult the workouts are.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, man. Well, that's great stuff, Trent. Thanks so much. We appreciate you taking time. I know you're busy, but appreciate you kind of breaking down what you've seen so far and taking time to do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
All right.
All right. We'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Uh-huh.